Good evening and welcome to BIC. This evening we have a presentation, The Case for Open Prisons. The presentation will begin with a short animation, followed by a conversation with Mr. S.T. Ramesh, who I'd like to welcome today. And then we'll have her presentation for about 30 minutes, and then the conversation followed by a Q&A session.
In the Indian penal system, of those convicted, 80% are first-time or accidental offenders without any criminal history. Most are sentenced and sent to closed prisons in the state, which are generally located in isolated areas. These institutions themselves are stretched beyond capacity as more inmates are sentenced to prison each year. Overcrowding in prison is common, which results in shortcomings in access to basic facilities for the inmates. Proper food, basic sanitation, and access to health care remain key areas which still find problems in being addressed due to the state or budget's priorities. Under-trials are often forced to work in prison kitchens without pay, and legal aid is either denied or out of reach for many. Over time, a prisoner may also lose her family's social support because of the hardships faced by them in reaching the prison and even meeting the inmate for a few minutes. While prisons are correctional institutions, living under such inhumane conditions behind bars is not only degrading to a person physically and psychologically, the reformative aspect is lost in the process. In contrast, an open prison is a self-regulated system that acts as a bridge to rehabilitation and social reintegration. The state has to provide only the basic infrastructure for the inmates and deploy minimum staff to maintain order. The inmates are given the freedom as well as the responsibility to make themselves productive citizens by earning a living. They also have the opportunity to stay with their families inside the prison. By working on a trust-based structure, the onus of being a responsible citizen provides inmates with a rehabilitative and reformative environment. A graded liberty structure eventually leading to release of the inmate acts as a reward program. As an alternative to the regressive, archaic and colonial closed prison system, an open prison provides an opportunity to create a better mental health system and a far better society for all. The expansion of the open prison system in the country has been expedited by the Supreme Court of India in its 2017 order. It was prompted by a detailed prison inspection report of Bihar's closed prisons by Smita Chakraburtty, which was commissioned by the High Court judge and Bihar State Legal Services Authority. A suo motu cognizance of this report was taken by the Supreme Court, the National Human Rights Commission, and the Parliamentary Standing Committee, Department of the Law and Justice. The Apex Court then ordered all high courts and state legal services authorities to conduct similar prison inspections. Smita was then invited by Rajasthan to inspect the state's prisons. The Rajasthan High Court judge also asked Smita to conduct a special study of the open prisons of the state. The Open Prison Report was published by Rajasthan State Legal Services Authority. Seeing the overall benefit in operating open prisons, the Supreme Court of India directed all states to establish open prisons. The open prison system serves not only as a rehabilitative system for inmates, it also has benefits for the state in reducing the huge costs involved in taking care of the inmates as well as the prison staff. The costs of maintaining an inmate in an open prison is a fraction of that of a closed prison. By reducing the number of staff per inmate, the state also saves immensely on salary and maintenance. While the financial benefits are clearly visible, the cycle of change more than helps the state in not overburdening its existing infrastructure while simultaneously facilitating better lives for all through this penitentiary model.
I'm Smita and I advocate for open prisons. And in 2017, the Supreme Court also accepted my recommendations of implementing the concept of open prisons across the country. Now, the the term open prison actually acts as an oxymoron, you know. I mean, open and prison, they just don't go with each other. So usually whenever I speak about open prison, there is this usual question that I come across, that what about punishment? What about crime and offense and punishment? And what about the victim? So this, I would just like to clarify in the very beginning that open prison has got nothing to do with say, I mean, prisoner rights are not in conflict with victims' rights. That's like the first principle. Secondly, the prisons in India, according to law, they are correctional institutions. They are reformatory centers. So it's not prison itself is an absolute sentence. Like the punishment is linear, which is defined by time. It's linear. So somebody perpetrates an offense, the punishment is defined by, say, 7-year sentence or life sentence or a 10-year sentence. So that sentence itself is the punishment. One does not have to add to that punishment. Like, so you have a sentence and then you put the person in a cage. So there is no description of that. We are used to seeing a prison which is a colonial structure, which has been, most of the Indian prisons are over 100 years old, and the architecture, the law has changed, but the prison architecture hasn't changed. So yeah, so I'll do a little bit of a presentation, which I was appointed as the prison observer by the High Court of Bihar, and then as a prison commissioner by the High Court of Rajasthan to conduct prison inspections. And these are some of the findings from my prison inspections. I mean, the condition of Indian prisons. So I'll be speaking about the inhuman conditions prevalent inside the Indian prisons, which acts as a double jeopardy. You know, like prisoners are already sentenced inside prison, which itself is the punishment, and the architecture, the inhuman condition prevalent inside prison adds to that sentence. So this is the general data on overcrowding. When there was a case going on in the Supreme Court, inhuman conditions in prisons, and Justice Madan Lokur was the presiding judge. And at that point, he asked all the states to present data on overcrowding. So this is statistics. This does not represent human features in these statistics, but we'll go to it. So on an average, prison overcrowding is around 150% is the national average, which means if there is space for one inmate to stay, there are 1.5 inmates staying, like 1.5 people more staying. So if you think of a single bed, that's the space allotted for one inmate. And imagine like sharing a single bed with 2 more people for 10 years. So people sleep in terms. They take turns to sleep. You can't stretch, you can't sit. There's no concept of privacy. There is no concept of dignity. So that's the data, but that's the national average. But in reality, so this is a macro level data that we are talking about. But in reality, when I visited prisons, and prison overcrowding is dependent on barracks. So prisons are divided into wards and barracks. Now, say today there is a high security prisoner, so they will empty a barrack. So say 50 prisoners from one barrack is emptied for keeping one high security prisoner. So these 50 prisoners will go to some other barrack, or say there is a heavy rainfall happening and one barrack is flooded. So or like 5 barracks are flooded. So say 100 prisoners from these barracks will be shifted to another barrack. There's already existing overcrowding in those barracks. So in reality, if one checks barrack-wise overcrowding, so I visited a prison in Phalodi, which is a remote place in western part of Rajasthan. Nobody even knows where it exists. But Phalodi has a subdivisional prison with a prison capacity of 17 prisoners. But when I visited the prison, there were 74 prisoners. And so can you imagine a space for 17 inmates, which we can get into the details of the definition of the place allotted per prisoner in a prison, which itself is, we can debate on that, which is not sufficient. So over there, if there's space for 17 inmates, that's the prison capacity. 74 inmates are staying, so it's definitely more than 150% overcrowding. It's like 300% overcrowding, 400% overcrowding. And this overcrowding without facilities of drinking water, toilet, food, lockup hours are 15 hours a day. It's like actually keeping humans, like caging humans, like smuggled animals. We live in a society, we live in a world where we talk about not caging animals. But our prisons we are extremely okay with caging humans, our fellow citizens. Most of them are under trial prisoners, which means we don't even know whether they've perpetrated an offense or not. So I'll just run you through the slide, which has visuals, which will help you understand prison problems. So this is the prison that I was talking about, Phalodi. So this is the barrack in which prisoners are expected to be under lockup for 15 hours a day. So you can see, they don't have space to stand together, spending 10 years, 15 years, 20 years of their lifetime. So because the prison inspection was happening, they painted the prison walls, so it's like bright, like white in color. It was whitewashed, but there's no space. I have no idea how they spend their time. There's no toilet inside this barrack. So 15 hours a day, you're locked up with a lot of people and you don't know what to do. So anyway, this is a prison overcrowded barrack in Udaipur Central Jail. Yeah, I think the picture speaks for itself. So this is how prisoners stand when I inspect prisons. Like they wait for me. Whoever wants to speak to me, like puts out their hands from the prison bars. So yeah, sometimes I count the number of hands which are out, so I know like I've met all of the inmates and whoever wanted to speak to me. So, and a prison which is supposed to be a correctional institution, these are cage structures which we still use. Now see, incidentally, you're seeing only pictures of Rajasthan prisons, because Rajasthan, I had permission to take photographs inside prison. In other states, I don't have permission to take photographs, because prison is not like a tourist spot. You can't go over there, you can't take photographs, you can't take selfies, you can't take photographs of prisoners. It's a high security zone. So these are the cage structures in which inmates are kept. And this is a high security cell where a terror convict is supposed to stay. And this is a place where, this is a 8 feet by 10 feet space where people stay for 30 years, 20 years. They don't come out. Their lockup, theirs is not a 15-hour lockup time. Lockup means like you stay inside the cage for 15 hours and then you can go out in the prison campus. A terror convict can't come out. So this is how they stay. The bed and the toilet is next to each other. There's no running water. There is no drinking water. This is Jodhpur Central Jail. This is the prison barrack in which, say, there are nearly, and I think the photograph captures around 30 prisoners, but there were more than like 70 prisoners in this barrack. And this is their toilet for 15 hours a day. This is a toilet of a VIP prisoner. In Jodhpur Central Jail, we had Salman Khan staying, so without naming him in my PPT, and this was the special toilet created for him. And this is a new toilet built in Barmer Central Jail. So even prison roti making, this is the food. These are general. So this is rodent infestation in prisons, and this is how prison staff stays. This is how prison staff cook their food. So, if you talk about prison reforms, we cannot speak about prison reforms without including the prison staff. And this is the condition of this is their working condition. So one can imagine, this is a staff barrack. These are like when we speak in general, we speak about life sentencing, and we are we the general belief is like kari se kari saza hona chahiye, life sentence is a must. And yeah, so a lifer actually looks like this inside a prison. I mean, he's not even the shadow of the individual. If at all he has at all perpetrated an offense, he is not even the shadow of the individual who had perpetrated the offense. And they're physically infirm right now. It's actually inhuman to keep people like these inside prison. So one should also question life sentencing, long sentencing practices. This man is Dr. Habib. He's in prison for the last 25, 26 years. He's a terror convict. There is no direct evidence against him, and he's 94 years old. I think this is a picture which is taken 4 years ago, so he's 98 years old, and he poses no threat to the society, but he's still in prison. And yeah, so this is expenses per month in a closed prison. So on an average, this figure has actually gone up. On an average, the state spends money of the public exchequer around 7 to 10,000 rupees per prisoner per month, and the outcome is the conditions that we just witnessed. So this is the situation, and this is an average annual budget, like 160 crores, 150 crores is an annual state budget for prisons. So say the state of Bihar's annual budget is around 155 crores, but living conditions of prisoners are just the same. So this is an open prison, which is an absolute contrast from what we just saw. But just keeping it for a moment over here, and this is a prison. An open prison is a prison without bars. It is a prison without locks, without prison guards. This is a prison in Rajasthan, which is around 70 years old. So I mean, nearly 70 years old. It was created in the early 50s. And this is a prison system in which prisoners, they stay with their families. They go out in the morning, they come back in the evening. Their families are not under any observation. There is minimum security. Like, these prisons are governed by prison staff themselves. These prisons are governed by prisoners themselves. So there is a Bandi Panchayat, or a prisoner governing body. And incidentally, rate of recidivism in these prisons are negligible, which means like prisoners escaping or prisoners re-offending from an open prison is negligible. So this is a prison system that I came across accidentally. I was commissioned to inspect the prisons of Bihar, and there are 58 prisons in Bihar. The Patna High Court judge, the Chief Justice, asked me to inspect all the prisons of the state of Bihar, and after that, the report which I produced, which I submitted to the High Court, that was taken up by the Supreme Court of India, and the Supreme Court made it mandatory for all states to conduct Bihar-like prison inspections. And incidentally, I went to Delhi to present my report to the Supreme Court, and Rajasthan was close to Delhi, so I had an invite. At that point, I had an invite from multiple states. So when the Rajasthan, so I thought, since I'm visiting Delhi, I might as well go to Rajasthan, because just like a bus drive or like a road drive away. And when I went over there, the DG prison of Rajasthan, Mr. Ajit Singh, he told me that, we have a problem over here. We have to conduct prisoner eviction. And I was wondering, like, I've spent like nearly 10 years of my life, 8 years of my life, studying prisons, meeting prisoners every single day of my life. And then I've never come across a prisoner who doesn't want to leave prisons. And we've seen it. They stay in cages. So no human being would want to live in a cage. And when Ajit sir told me that, I think you have a reputation among prisoners. They think that you can raise a voice for them. So do meet them and try to convince them to leave the prison. Otherwise, I'll have to evict them. Probably I'll have to do a lathi charge, and I don't want that lathi charge to be on my career. So I was like, it didn't make sense to me at all. So I said that, sir, I would love to visit the prison in which you are conducting eviction. So when I went over there, I didn't realize I was in a prison. So I was telling the superintendent that fine, I mean, we are here, aapne chai bhi pilaya humko, but jail kahan hai? Because I have to report to the court also, no? I can't waste time standing in a village. So he said, jail to yahi hai, madam, this is the prison and this is your prisoners, these are the people who are here, aap baat karo, inko bolo jail chhodne ke liye. So when I started interacting with the prisoners in Sanganer open prison, which is a prison near Jaipur, they started saying that, ma'am, we don't want to leave the prison. My daughter is sitting for her board exams next month. If we leave the prison right now, I don't know where we'll stay. Somebody said, na, humko to naukri laga hai idhar, we can't leave. I mean, if I go back to my village, I'll lose my job. So I was like, this is surreal. What is happening over here? If this is true, I mean, if this is real, then, I mean, the existing model or the traditional prison model seems redundant. So anyway, so that was, so then I went back to the High Court. I told the judge that, Rajasthan has 29 open prisons. And this was 2016 when I went and told the judge. And he was like, ये open prison क्या है? I said, sir, आप ही तो भेजते हैं open jail में लोगों को. He said, ये भाग नहीं जाते हैं लोग. I said, यहाँ पे तो उल्टा हो रहा है. So they don't run away. They actually want to stay longer in prison. So then the judge said, so we must study this prison system, because the High Court Chief Justice at that point, he had come from Gujarat. So they didn't have any open prison system in Gujarat then. And he was also pretty baffled about this. So I conducted, so at that point there were 29 open prisons in Rajasthan, and I conducted, visited all the 29 prisons of the state, open prisons of the state of Rajasthan. I interacted with the prisoners. The police department gave me access to all the case files of the prisoners, and the findings were, I came across some startling findings, like majority of the inmates, convicted inmates, are one-time offenders or accidental offenders. That means they have no criminal antecedent, which means they have perpetrated an offense in a moment. First of all, we don't know whether they have perpetrated an offense or not, because a criminal trial is a very lengthy process. It takes years to defend yourself in court. And the right of the accused to be able to be present in the court, to defend yourself in the court, these are multiple procedures which is not possible for an ordinary citizen to do. So majority of the convicted prisoners is the garden variety prisoner that we think of. They are poor, they come from marginalized community, they didn't have access to a lawyer, they don't know what is happening in the court, they don't even know about the sections that they've been convicted for. So this is the majority, like 81% of convicted prisoners are people who don't even know why they are being convicted. So the literacy rate is so low that, it's not about literacy also, it's about legal awareness. They just don't know, they don't have access. You see, justice in our country is not cheap. You have to really be, to get justice, we talk about equality in front of the law, but in reality, it's a very different picture. So yeah, this is the information that we gathered, and so here's the information on the cost effectiveness of open prisons. Open prisons are 14 times cheaper than closed prison, where the cost per prisoner per month in a closed prison on an average is anything between 7,000 to 10,000 rupees. Cost per prisoner per month in an open prison is 500 rupees. So, you see the difference, right? Then in an open prison, the cost is cheaper. That's because we say one staff per 80 prisoners in an open prison, and the fooding. So in an open prison, it's a village setup. So prisoners, they stay with their family. Only the housing is provided by the government. And in some prisons in Rajasthan, not even construction work has been done. So the prisoners, they stay in clay hutments, but they're okay with it. But if there is electricity in that prison, the electricity bill comes to the prisoners. So they have to pay for their electricity bill, they have to pay for their fooding, they have to pay for upkeep of their family, they have to look for their own jobs. So this is a system of graded liberty that we are talking about. And that is why the expense is much lower. So this is again the accommodation, very basic accommodation provided to the prisoners. They even maintain their own quarters. Like if they want to paint, they paint the quarter. This is an argument that we always come up with, that when it comes to, say, education, the state should be like putting money on child education, nutrition, health, and not waste money on prisoners who do not pose any threat to the society. Also, when I'll actually jump these slides because these actually give statistics of cost effectiveness and why is the open prison, in every state there is a budget deficit when it comes to primary education. There is a budget deficit when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to health or public services, governance. There is definitely a budget deficit. So instead of spending money, because in a traditional closed prison, the percentage of habitual offenders it's very less. Like if there is a prison, there are 2,000 prisoners, there'll be less than 5 prisoners or 2 prisoners who are gangsters or who are part of organized crimes. Majority of prisoners are non-violent or accidental offenders, or people who have perpetrated offenses of livelihood, like motorcycle chori. If they had a livelihood, they would not steal a motorcycle, and so those kind of things happen. So crime is a very complex thing. So what we try to do as an organization, as PAAR tries to convince the government, we do budget analysis of each state, and we also do a crime analysis of the state, and we go and convince them, telling them that you should go for an open prison system. Majority of your prisoners can be shifted to an open prison, and that way it's a humane alternative, it is a cost-effective alternative, and also saves a lot of the state's money. So this is the data that we came across. This is the Sanganer open prison that I was talking about. These are convicted prisoners. There are women prisoners in Sanganer as well, because Sanganer is a gender neutral prison, because it's a community living space where prisoners, they live with their families. These are women prisoners. They are all convicted for murder, and they stay over there, and they've come out in the prison and they've got married, they've resettled, they've started their life again. This is an inmate with his child, and this is how the attendance happened, because the prisoners go out in the morning, they come back in the evening, and the attendance is done by prisoners themselves. So if a prisoner escapes or does not come during attendance, then the prisoner governing body itself is going to report to the prison authority or to the police authority, and then an FIR will be filed, and an absconding report will be filed, and the prisoner will immediately be sent back to the closed prison. This is an open prison in Bikaner. This is the CRC Research Institute of Bikaner, and a lot of people keep on asking me that don't the prisoner run away from the open prison? Why don't they run away? So an ideal situation would be, instead of me talking about open prison, we had a prisoner coming and speaking about open prisons right now. And the basic principle, the basic reason why a prisoner doesn't run away from an open prison is, first of all, these guys are not criminals. Like when we talk about crime is actually an incident. The police investigates an incident of crime. The court decides, the judgment is also based on an incident of crime. And an individual is more than an incident in his life, right? His or her life. So the open prison system actually focuses on the individual removed from the incident. So which is actually, so people who have actually perpetrated an offense also, once they come to an open prison, they don't want to do that, because open prison is second chance for a prisoner. And open prison is that is the concept of graded liberty. You see, liberty is so precious. See, if they don't come for an attendance, or if they are late for a roll call, they will immediately be sent back to the closed prison. So they immediately lose their liberty, their dignity, and nobody would want to do that. And majority of the prisoners, they don't have anywhere to run away also. I mean, everybody is not like a billionaire staying in some foreign country and attending cricket matches and appearing on media. So that is like, those are affluent people, we know, but majority of the people, like even I don't have a place to run away. I have one place, my home is in Calcutta. I mean, I've made a lot of effort building that home of mine. I don't want to run away. I mean, where will I go? I can't make another house in some other city. I mean, it's just not possible. Imagine like a poor villager, he has nowhere to go. So anyway, so this is that open prison I was talking about. This is in a forest area. Yes. Okay. So this is in a forest area, and this is in a no man's land. So you can't make permanent constructions over here. So a researcher once worked with me. She's from Cambridge, and she said this is inhuman condition. But I said, people in that locality, they all stay in clay hutments. So the prisoners, you tell them that we can't provide you construction, like permanent construction houses. They'll say, we'll just stay in a tent, but you want to stay away out of prison. So this is Jetsar, this is that clay hutment prison, and these are prisoner children. They have no clue that they're staying in prison with their parents. That's why prison guards don't wear prison uniforms in Rajasthan, and in open prisons in Rajasthan, and prisoner children, they think that they're staying in an open camp in a community. That's why the open prisons are called open camps, not prisons.
Smita, that was a very, very good presentation, and what is important is you are an independent person. You are not part of the system, you are an independent, so that provides a certain objectivity to the whole study. I'll just take a few minutes I served as chief of prison among other jobs I did in Karnataka police. See, prison is one of the most colonial institutions in our country. There are many colonial institutions. Police is one of the colonial vestiges. Similarly, prison is even more colonial than police, because Macaulay was the person who created prisons in India in 1837, even before the War of Independence. So, unfortunately, even today, the colonial character of the prisons continue. In terms of that, you saw a lot of it, and still those caged barricades and grills and so on and so forth. The irony is that many Indian leaders, we talk about freedom fighters, Gandhi went to jail, Jawaharlal Nehru went to jail, and later during emergency, lot of the present crop of leaders, they claim, they come tell me, I was in prison during emergency and all that. But prison reform is something which nobody seems to think about. Mrs. Indira Gandhi ordered, announced a prison reforms committee, Justice Mullah committee in 1983. In 2003, there was one Amarnathan IPS officer who was heading the BPR&D. He published a 200 and odd page report on prison reforms. Kiran Bedi, when she was BPR&D chief, she came out with a draft prison manual for the whole country. And it was a good model for everybody to copy. So prison is a very forbidding place. The prison reform is the need of the hour. Crying need today is prison reforms, and it encompasses a lot of things, which includes open air prisons and how to improve the conditions of prisons inside the closed prison. I was prison chief. I made some experiments. I tried put some reforms in place. Food. The food in prison, there is no sanctioned staff to cook food in prison. So the prison inmates themselves are made to cook food. What kind of a food it will be? So general complaint is food is very unpalatable. It can't be eaten. It's bad food. So one of the reforms I thought of was paid food was supplied by ISKCON, because there's a good structure, infrastructure available, rice, hot, nothing posh, nothing glamorous, just hot rice and lentils and some vegetables and buttermilk. This was supplied and it was working very well, and subsequently payment issue started and it was discontinued, but the experiment was good. Similarly, we did a few other experiments, like instead the visitors, something like a Parapanagrahara prison which has 5,000 prison inmates on an, I don't say prisoners, I use the word prison inmates because it includes under trials. I don't want to brand them as prisoners. So the Parapanagrahara has something like 5,000 prison inmates, and it's an uphill task for the visitors to come. Imagine somebody from Tumkur coming, spending money, travel, stay, and then that queue system. So I introduced telephone system so that people can talk. It was all recorded and it's announced, it's displayed there that your call is being monitored and rationed, and they can't make indefinite number of calls. So some reforms were made, and similarly parole is one important thing. See, ours is a reformatory system. Ours is not a punitive kind of a criminal jurisprudence. When you want to reform people, you have to create a stake for him in the society. He should feel like going back to his family and leading a life. That should be the intention of prison sentence. He has to be punished for a certain wrong which he has done so that we maintain equilibrium in the society. But then don't treat him like Justice Malimat told me once. All rights are available to a prison inmate except the right to liberty. He is confined to a space. Apart from that, he is entitled to normal food, normal clean drinking water, clean air, entertainment, clothing, blah, blah, blah. So, except liberty, you have no right to take away other facilities from a prisoner. So, the main problem is nobody is talking about. It's one of the most neglected departments in the government. In any government, state government, if you see, Delhi, they hype up a little bit. Tihar jail is hyped a little bit because it's capital city. But even Delhi is bad. I have seen Tihar jail, and the conditions are extremely bad. Prison is a closed institution. Therefore, the irregularities and lot of corruption takes place there. The prison staff is very, very corrupt. And I sympathize with them despite this corruption, because the prison officer is the first prisoner. He spends his time in the prison. He is no different from a prison inmate. So I have my sympathies, at the same time I can't condone their corruption. So the problem is lack of reforms, and then there is a serious budget problem. They don't allocate budget. The 90% of the budget allocated to prison department is taken care of in feeding prisoners and paying the bills, electricity, water bills, etc. There is no money left for development, improving. So overcrowding is the biggest, if you ask me, what is one major problem of Indian prisons? It is overcrowding. Old infrastructure, but any number of people, nobody worries whether there is space or not. The judges simply send people to judicial custody. When they are sent to judicial custody, they come and land up. And as it was suggested, 2/3 of the prison inmates in India are under trial prisoners. Under trial means they are not convicted. They may be acquitted and they may be proved innocent. But what happens to the time they spent in the prison? So we have a very skewed criminal justice system. It's a very big subject, cannot be covered in a 1-hour discussion. The prison system is one of the limbs of the criminal justice system. That the police, the investigation, the prosecution, the judiciary, and then the correctional administration comes as the 4th limb of the criminal justice system. So the entire system has to be reformed and plenty has to be done. Now, I feel every single person who enters the prison needs counseling. In our country, everybody needs counseling. Women who are victims of crime, or they deserve counseling. People who are diagnosed with cancer, they require counseling. If there is unemployment problem, one of the ways we can solve the problem is produce a number of good qualified counselors who can counsel different sections of people. Actually, we don't get counsel and we suffer, and psychologically everybody talks of mental health and mental issues. A prison inmate, when he enters, he needs counseling. And there has to be constant counseling, and I had even sent a proposal to the government to appoint X number of counselors, which was very utopian. I knew the government will not even bother about it, but it has not seen the light of the day till today. So everybody is afflicted. It's a mental health issue, and studies reveal there is a nexus between mental health, crime, and substance abuse. During my tenure, we got a study conducted through NIMANS with the help of Karnataka Legal Service Authority, which brought out, 5,000 prison inmates were enumerated. Their urine samples were collected and tested. Majority of them tested positive for substance abuse. Some substance or the other is abused. Now coming to the open air prison, I can go on and on and on, but I'll stop about prisons in general and talk about there is one open air prison in Karnataka. It was established in 1972 and it is located at Devanalli in a village called Koramangala, about 10 to 12 kilometers from the Bangalore International Airport. It is located in an area of 113 acres. There are 52 inmates there. There are different models of open air prison. It is certainly not like the Rajasthan model. They are free to move about in that campus. There are barracks, they go and sleep there. There are no women. Out of 52, 50 of them are undergoing life imprisonment. That means they must have committed murder or something like that. As she said, they are not all horrible Veerappan-like figures. They have committed a crime under sudden and grave provocation and they have suffered for it. Many of them repent. Many of them are miserable people who would not dare to run away. And the escape rate, I was told when I talked to the prison superintendent of the Koramangala prison, the last escape was in 2010. It was not an escape, he jumped parole. So that was the last one, and for the last 12 years, nobody has even attempted to escape or jump parole or something like that, and that fellow has not been caught. So there are in 113 acres, there are a lot of more than 1,400 coconut trees. There is a lot of horticulture activity, mango, chiku, etc., etc. They have 3 oxen for plowing. There are 3 tractors. They do what I liked was when the officer said, "Sir, skill development." When he said skill development, I felt very happy because the very fact that there is some effort to create skills among them. Because prison industry is always stitching and making almaris and carpentry and carpet making and all that. There are a lot of, they can be creative. And he told me that people are being trained in motor winding and vermiculture and so on and so forth. And this is the prison, open air prison in Karnataka, Koramangala. I personally feel we should have at least one open air prison for starters, corresponding to each central prison. There are about half a dozen central prisons in Karnataka: Bangalore, Mysore, Gulbarga, Bellary, Bijapur, and Mangalore. So in these places at least you create a corresponding open air prison. People are not simply sent to open air prison. Initially they come to the closed prison. They are watched. When their good behavior is noticed, their good conduct, good behavior. Once in the judgment of the superintendent, prison superintendent, he feels that he can be sent to the open air prison. That's how they are sent. Nobody is sent directly to open air prison because that will be a little risky because you know nothing about it, about the guy. And and talking about buildings, you said most of the prison buildings are 100 years old. You should go and visit Bijapur prison. It is an Adil Shahi building. Adil Shahis ruled Bijapur. They were contemporary to Vijayanagar Empire. So it is an Adil Shahi building with some 6 feet, 8 feet thick wall and so on and so forth. That's where the prison is coming. So much for our infrastructure and so much for our modern infrastructure creation. So I think I will stop here because I can go on and on and on. And if there are any questions, we can, between us, we'll be happy to handle them. Thank you.
Thank you First of all, thank you for the presentation today. So the question I had was, could you shed some more light on the criteria which is taken into consideration before inmates are sent to open prisons? Is there, for example, does the type of crime they're accused of or convicted for factor in, or do they have to spend a certain amount of time in a traditional prison before being transferred to an open prison? And is there like a set of guidelines that are official, or is it just based on what the superintendent of the prison feels? Is it like a personal judgment? What exactly is the criteria?
Yeah, so as a criteria, usually people who have life sentences are sent to open prison. My argument is that people with shorter sentences should also be sent to an open prison. By life sentence, it's mostly 90% of the prisoners, like even Sir said, like majority of the prisoners going to an open prison are murder convicts, are convicted for murder. And again, I would question the conviction, because one would question the quality of lawyering, evidence, and how the case went through. But majority, the nature of offense is such that there is a high possibility that the inmate is not going to do that. Here, I mean, as a researcher, as somebody who advocates for open prison, I always get into a conflict or an argument with police officers who would say that, what if they commit a crime again? And I would say, like, that's a leap. Like, it's a leap that you're taking. I'm saying, what if they don't commit a crime again? And so it's a hypothesis that we are making. And secondly, it's usually the conduct of the inmate, which has been tested. Like in Rajasthan, if you spend 1/3 of your sentence in a prison and you earn remission as well, then only you can go to an open prison. And open prison is not an absolute sentence. So it's every day you have to earn that trust. It's a trust-based system. One day you're delayed, you're late or you come into the prison, you're drunk, you're like abusing. If there's a misconduct, you go back to the closed prison. So liberty is the incentive over here. It can't be evaluated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. No, I had seen it in the TV that in Simla there was a open prison where the prisoners are cooking and they are selling it in Simla and all that. I mean, I don't have any question. I just wonder that, why such good things cannot be encouraged and spread. I mean, it is obviously positive. I saw this program long time back.
Yeah, I would like to comment, or I would take yours as a comment, as a supportive comment. You see, what happens is, so the prison, like in Koramangala, in Karnataka also, the prison department gets into the challenge of creating that kind of a space. So with developing, with urbanization, we know that there's a space constraint. And ordinary citizens don't have jobs. So if you expect the prison department to provide skill development, training, work. So the prison that Sir was speaking about, there are less than 20 prisoners who are working in this bakery, in this canteen that they run. And it's not possible to provide that kind of a canteen everywhere. Like even Tihar jail has a canteen. But again, it's not possible to... India has 1,400 prisons. Say the Phalodi prison, they don't have the kind of resources to develop skills or provide, say, a canteen or a livelihood to the prisoner. But if one is facing the challenge, if the administration is facing a challenge that we can't provide livelihood to the prisoner, then we will not send... That is why we can't send the prisoner to an open prison. We cannot provide that kind of a space like Koramangala has. That's why we will not send him to an open prison. So this becomes a challenge, and it's a regressive discussion because there is no solution to that. Rather, what Rajasthan did was they asked the prisoner that, we can't provide you with agricultural work. We can't provide you with any employment. But we are providing you with liberty to stay with your family. You will have to look for your own employment. Don't come back to us for your fooding. We'll just give you this quarter to stay. And even electricity and water is your responsibility. So the prisoner was okay. I've come across many prisoners in Rajasthan who had just freshly come out of the closed prison. They didn't have any jobs, so they didn't have food in their quarters. So I asked them, in prison you get 3, मतलब आपको तो 3 खाना मिलता है दिन में. So why do you want to go back to the closed prison? Because here you're not getting employment. So then they said, Madam, bhooka rahenge, we'll stay hungry, but we'll not go back to that cage. It's because again, liberty is the incentive. If you tell a person that I'm sending you to an open prison, you have to look for your own employment, they will definitely do that.
You said in Simla they produce food and all that. Among the prison industries, one of the most popular thing is bakery. So Parapanagrara prison, they have a bakery, they make bread, they make cookies. One problem with prison management is the prison officers don't know how to sell. They don't know how to sell and market their products. Even if quality products also they don't know. Actually, prison products are of good quality. The daris, the carpets they make. And there used to be a government order that all government departments should buy furniture, wooden furniture. In those days when we had wooden furniture, not those sleek furniture which you get today. You have to order only from prison. And there used to be a queue. Prison used to struggle to produce and meet this demand. So bakery is a very common thing. In some prisons they've been able to sell it to the public. You might have heard of some places, Delhi perhaps, their bakery products are very popular, even general public can buy. So bakery is a very common activity, one of the prison industries. I may just digress and say one of the problems in the prison is illnesses, infections. And HIV is a major problem because very often prison inmates come from very, very low socioeconomic background, and even before they enter the prison, they are afflicted with HIV. But there will be no detection. Now imagine in Bangalore kind of a situation to just get a HIV test from Parapanagrara, which is on the very, very far south of Bangalore, you have to send them to Bowring Hospital. You won't get vehicle, you won't get escort, and it will not work out. So we struggled a lot and created an ICTC center, Integrated Counseling and Testing Center in Parapanagrara prison, where people can volunteer to come and get tested. The moment you get tested and you are found to be HIV, it's a small place, and we had to go to Government of India and beg them to give the sanction this infrastructure. We provided the space, and we appointed a counselor and one lab assistant and some basic equipment. So today in Parapanagrara prison itself, there is an ICTC center, and it's continued fortunately for more than a decade, and people are tested, and once they are declared positive, the only thing is you give vitamins and so on and improve their immunity. The treatment is very simple, but the detection, identification is very important because you don't want these people to die because of low immunity because they are not detected. These are some of the experiments we have done, but with great, great difficulty.
Hi, so my question is, you mentioned the Rajasthan open prison where there was an surprising issue where the inmates, once they completed the sentence, it was hard for them to get them to leave the prison and get back reintegrated into society because they were sort of comfortable in that situation. And what are the challenges? How would you, as Sir said, create a stake in normal society for these prisoners once they've completed the reform to get back into actual society and contribute?
Yeah, so these prisoners in Rajasthan, they are actually a part of the society. In Rajasthan open prison, the prisoners go out of the prison, do their job, and not all prisoners want to do agricultural work. There are prisoners who are chartered accountants, there are prisoners who are PhD qualified lecturers, school teachers, accountants, who run their own businesses. They have their own dabas, restaurants, drivers. So, prisoner is not like a general, the demography of prisoners, there are educated prisoners, there are people who already have skills. So if you tell an accountant to learn driving or do bakery work, he's not going to do that. So they are functional individuals. The problem in Rajasthan that happened was that suddenly the prison, because the prisoner loses track of time, suddenly the prison department says tomorrow you have to leave the quarter. So he has actually re-established himself. He's put a small thela, does the cooking in that locality. Now he comes from 400 kilometers remote village. So for him to suddenly get displaced again is a problem. So now what Rajasthan has done is that they have 6 months prior to the release of the prisoner, they inform the prisoner that in the next 6 months you have to leave. So what prisoners do is in 6 months time they also look for similar accommodation in near that locality where they have resettled and reorganized. And what is very interesting in Rajasthan, why the Rajasthan model has been so successful, because Rajasthan has the highest number of prisoners staying in an open prison. Sanganer is the largest open prison not only in Rajasthan, but it is the largest open prison in India, Perhaps it is the largest open prison in the world, and it has been a successful model because not only prisoners, they stay with their families. It is a gender neutral prison, like women prisoners stay, male prisoners stay, they all stay with their families. It's a village, it's a community setup. The prisoners, they go out of the prison, and the people from the locality come inside the prison. So there is a primary school inside Sanganer Open Prison where the school capacity is like, say, 50 students. And out of the 50 students, 7 of the students are prisoner children. Rest, they all come from the locality. There is an Anganwadi inside the Sanganer Open Prison, which has a diameter of 10 kilometers. People from the locality send their children in that Anganwadi center. Also, previously there used to be a prisoner, and this isn't like in the late 80s. There used to be a murder convict who was a doctor. At that time, Sanganer didn't have a doctor. So the doctor would go out in the morning and he had his chamber outside the prison, but in the evening he has to be inside the prison. So he would set up his chamber inside the prison, and people from the locality came inside Sanganer to get treated by the convicted prisoner doctor. So that is how social reintegration happens. So that is why it is a successful model. Otherwise, it wouldn't be successful, because we see a lot of prisons, a lot of open prisons. One of the problems with the open prison system is that people try to replicate a Scandinavian model. We can't, I mean, as a country, I don't think we can approach that model. We need to go by the community. We need to go by our existing system. So Sanganer has stood the test of time. It is a 70-year-old model, and it needs to be replicated across the country. That's what the Supreme Court also says. So, yeah, it's just people don't know about it. Just generating awareness will help.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Smita. Thank you.